Don't let the spiffy throwback gear fool you. Rob Blake of the LA Kings has no idea what he's doing. We'll explain. The Dodgers are going to summon a prospect to desperately patch up their rotation. And an Angel City player talks nice about the new owners. Good morning. I'm James. This is your daily dose of sports and snark for the greatest sports city in the world, Los Angeles. This is the faithful Angelenos Morning Report. And so it is July 6, 2024. It is a glorious morning here in the Sanctum Sanctorum of LA Sports, which we are moving, by the way. We'll start broadcasting from the new place in a couple of days. Do you like being in the know about LA? Well, if you do, click the like button. Click the subscribe button. There's a notification bell. Hit that to let you know when we drop new content. Sharing is caring. Let people know we exist, and by all means comment. Now, before we go through the news and notes and look at the scoreboard, Will Smith hit 3 solo home runs yesterday. Miguel Vargas also homered. Dodgers rally to an 8-5 victory over Milwaukee. The Sparks avoid setting a franchise-worst losing streak last night by beating the two-time defending WNBA champs last night, 98-93 in overtime. But the season's still halfway over, and they only have 5 wins, so baby steps. Meanwhile, today, Milwaukee's at the Dodgers at 2. James Paxton is 7-2 with a 4.28 ERA. Freddie Peralta, 6-4, 3.83 ERA. And Gotham FC is at Angel City FC at 7 o'clock. It's the final game for the ladies before the Olympic break. And what do you say we start off by talking some Kings hockey? Because yesterday, I asked what the hell was up with the Sparks. As Angelenos, we have high expectations for teams, even the ones we don't particularly care about, because they represent our town. Here at Faithful Angeleno Sports, though, we are anything but misogynists, so if we're going to clown the LA Sparks, we're going to have to take a focus on some of our other teams as well. We need to ask what the hell is going on with my beloved LA Kings. See, I was born the same year as the Kings. My upbringing was a mix of old-time hockey and the Catholic Church, which shows you how jacked up this mind really is. If you've ever seen, if you're old enough like I am, and you remember what old-time hockey is, you remember that there were just as likely to be fistfights in the seats of the Forum as there were to be on the ice. The cleanup crew had to mop up the blood in the stands before the Lakers game started. Now you bring the date to a hockey game, and she's like getting thrilled by 2 guys fighting on the ice. And I'm sitting there like, I needed to learn how to fight just to watch a game. That's how much the Kings are ingrained into my life. But the problem I've come to understand with the Kings now is the same problem that the Kings had when I was a little kid. See, the Kings have had 9 general managers in their history. 4 of them are former Kings players, and that includes current GM Rob Blake. In the case of 3 of those 4, they were team legends. We're talking Blake, Rogie Vachon, Dave Taylor. I presume players get hired to be GMs because the owner thinks that there's a chance that they could build a culture for the Kings, a vision of what it is to wear the Kings sweater. But Blake has no idea what culture he wants to bring. And I'm going to explain that as a fundamental problem. It is the absolute fundamental problem, in my opinion, with the LA Kings. Because the main thrust of NHL free agency is over. Yesterday, defenseman Caleb Jones is coming to the Kings from Colorado, and he is the latest 7th defenseman that the Kings have added. For those of you who don't watch hockey, you only suit up 6. So the Kings now have 10 defensemen under contract who played in the NHL last season. Big whoop. The top 6, though, are apparently already settled, even without Jones. Drew Doughty and Mikey Anderson, Vladislav Gavrikov and Jordan Spence, Brant Clark, and the other seventh defenseman, who gets promoted to sixth, Joel Edmondson. And Edmondson, by the way, gets that promotion simply because Blake signed him to a ridiculously overpaid 4-year contract. In other words, they go out of their way to get Jones, and he's going to wind up spending a lot of time in Ontario until somebody gets injured. And by the way, from that history, it's going to be Edmondson. So the Hockey News paused, and they asked if there was any other way that they could see the Kings upgrading their roster. And the answer was nah. They have about $10 million in cap space, but keep in mind, Quentin Byfield, Spence, maybe Arthur Kaliev hasn't been signed yet. And besides that, free agency in the NHL is just like free agency in the NBA. There's a feeding frenzy literally within the first couple of hours, and everybody else then starts picking at the bones. The roster right now for this team is set. And so we're left asking if anybody outside of a crack house would believe that this roster is any better than the one from last year. Would you believe it if I suggested that the Kings at least retain status quo? Of course not. And I don't blame you if you don't think that way. They are weaker at center. They are possibly weaker on defense. We mentioned it a few weeks ago. The Kings' big move this year was addition by subtraction. But Pierre-Luc Dubois is the flatulence that won't stop flatulating. Because even by trading him to Washington, the return was a bad contract from Washington. In other words, the Kings are about to be up against the salary cap again, which means that they have to hope that the younger players from their minor leagues can outplay their minimum wage contracts. You're going to need somebody from Ontario, like say Akil Thomas, to come up and play like a damn all-star. You'll need Byfield, Spence, and Clark to make another leap. If your biggest victory in the offseason is not quite correcting your biggest mistake of last offseason, then no, you're not better. The Kings, though, are different in one way, though, and that's what I'm ultimately getting at. That was what Blake wanted specifically for the team this year. They're bigger. He told the scribes that the roster from last year wasn't built to be physical. They weren't built to battle, that they didn't make opponents uncomfortable. In other words, that was the way the Kings were built when they won Stanley Cups. The heavy game. Does anybody remember that? The heavy game. Only nobody is going to confuse current coach Jim Hiller with Daryl Sutter. Nobody is going to confuse this roster for the roster that won cups in 2012 and 14, even though they still have Drew Doughty and they still have Anze Kopitar. Even worse, when Rob Blake first took over as GM, he scrapped the heavy game entirely. Oh, I'm reading the tea leaves. The NHL is moving to speed and skating. And now that they tried so hard to rebuild themselves into this speed and skating mode, they can't get out of the first round of the playoffs, and they're desperately trying to get bigger again. There is no culture, is my point. Going back, if you're hiring a GM, it's to build a culture. Blake went from, no, the heavy game doesn't work. We're going to try speed and skating. Oh, well, we've got to get heavier. Blake is just throwing turds against the wall in the hope that they stick. No vision, which means Rob Blake has no idea what the hell he's doing, which is why, despite desperately hearkening back to the Gretzky logo and colors, there is no reason to have faith in the Kings. And that's the memo. The Athletic is reporting that the Dodgers are expected to call up left-handed prospect Jaron Robleski from AAA. He'll start against Milwaukee on Sunday. He's currently the 9th-ranked prospect in the Dodgers system. Now, I realize that might not sound like a big deal. I get it. Dad always urged me to try to finish at least 9th. But Robleski is rocketing up the system. The dude only made 2 starts at AAA Oklahoma City. Obviously, he's here to stop the bleeding in the rotation. Since Yoshinobu Yamamoto went down to injury, the Dodgers' ERA is 5.03. Walker Buehler and Clayton Kershaw aren't even particularly close to returning. So, we talked about this for the last month or so. They're basically trying to maintain some semblance of a roster and keep that massive ass lead that they built until Yamamoto comes back, until Mookie Betts comes back, until Kershaw and Buehler, etc. Jason Hayward's MRI indicated that he has a bruised knee, not damage to the meniscus or ligaments. Dave Roberts said Hayward and the Dodgers dodged a bullet. Hayward injured himself in the first inning, leaping to attempt to rob a home run. He didn't rob the home run, and when he land, he no feel good. Hayward is still going to be out for a couple of weeks, so this probably means there's a spot for James Outman to try to see if he can restart his major league career. He did stink up the joint, but since his demotion to AAA, he's hitting 9 home runs with 21 RBI. The average, though, is just 279. Joe Kelly made a second appearance for Rancho Cucamonga on Friday. He entered in the 5th inning and threw 15 pitches. He's had 2 innings total in rehab, allowed no runs. And Gus Varland is returning to the major leagues, while Nick Ramirez gets dropped to Oklahoma City. As Angels City FC turns, Disney CEO Bob Iger and his wifey are edging closer to purchasing the so-called most valuable women's soccer team on the planet. And as a side note, I'm going to call her wifey because the press is trying to push this narrative that this is all her doing. She's the shot caller, right? Now, don't get me wrong, I'm sure she's quite intelligent. She is a dean at USC. But since the press is trying to push this narrative that she's the shot caller, no, not the guy who runs Disney. No, it's her. I'm going to call her wifey. Like I said, I bet she's an extremely respectable and well-accomplished woman. But let's not fool ourselves. She's not calling the shots. It's the guy who cut the check. Anyway, the point is, now that there's probably new owners coming in, everybody in the franchise is going to kiss their asses. I get it. Hell, whenever a new owner is coming in, you don't want to get downsized. So you put lipstick on and you start kissing that ass. And that includes the players. Forward Christian Press said she's excited to have her checks direct deposited from the Disney company. Quote, as someone who has a very vested interest in the business of women's sports, there's 2 things. First thing I think is, hell yeah, unquote. Now then, after she stopped kissing up, the truth came out. Quote, they also have a lot of things that they need to get right. And a sale like this is a lot of money to the club. It allows the club to continue to professionalize and push the envelope in terms of expectations for women's sports, unquote. To which we pause. Professionalize? What the hell do you mean professionalize? I mean, seriously, does the GM not have a cell phone? What are we talking about here? The damn scribe, though, and this is one of the things I hate about covering women's sports because it's always this uplifting narrative about girl power. What is wrong? What is not professional about Angel City FC? Because there might be something that isn't professional. This club has only made the playoffs once in its history, and they are currently 11th place in the NWSL. What's going on? Are they using manila envelopes and typewriters to send inter-office communication instead of email and text and DMs? Maybe if they were more professional, they'd be title contenders. Somebody needs to, what is not professional about Angel City FC? Have we stumbled onto a massive problem with the franchise? But you let me know what you think in the comments thread. Do you believe in Rob Blake as GM of the Kings? Are you okay with the idea of somebody who's had just 2 starts at AAA being the potential savior of the Dodgers rotation? And if you enjoy the content, don't forget to subscribe to Faithful Angelenos. We're talking LA sports every single day here. Thank you for watching. I'm James. We'll be back tomorrow. Faithful Angelenos is a Kian Corte El Queso production. Take care.